Hello, everybody. I'm Queen, a developer advocate at Prefect. Today we have Will. He's a senior technical product manager at Prefect. Will, it's great to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit more about what you're gonna demo today? So,
Yeah, for sure. So basically just here to talk about our newest Prefect version, that's 2.3.0. A lot of new exciting features and enhancements. And to be frank, there's more than I could possibly really fit in on 30 minutes, and it would probably get kind of boring. But I have a couple exciting improvements to deployments and a couple just enhancements that I wanted to shout out. And I think if we have time, I'd love to do a demo of, in particular, GitHub storage blocks.
that's awesome. I'm excited to learn more about it as well.
Great. Yeah. Should I just do that right now?
Yes.
Cool. Yeah, so lots of stuff added in 2.3. We've got a blog post, we've got a community announcement, and kind of the most authoritative and exhaustive place to look at those things is the release notes. I will ping that in a chat in a second, but there's a massive list, including some stuff from community contributors, which I'll shout out in a sec. So we've been working on hardening and refining the deployments primitive for a while now, and I should correct that a little bit. I haven't really been working on this at all. I'm just bragging about it for the people who have worked on it. We've made a lot of progress with deployments over the last month or so, kind of coming into the GA period, and we're continuing to harden it, giving it kind of more intuitive user experiences and having it integrate with more parts of the data stack. And one of the ways, or kind of two of the ways that we've improved deployments with this release is, for one, it's probably the top most requested feature that we've gotten since GA. But it's GitHub storage blocks. So now, if your code is already in GitHub, which many of our clients and internally we use GitHub as well, if your code's already in GitHub, you don't need to put it somewhere else to deploy it with Prefect. So that's super exciting. We've kind of implemented this read-only storage block that allows you to just have your code sit where it is and not have to reason with really any other external storage unless you want to, unless you find value of storing flow code in S3 or baked into a Docker image, or locally in some cases. There's kind of a bunch of different ways to slice things. But with GitHub, we find a super straightforward path for folks who are already using GitHub. And we love GitHub, so we're happy to interface with that system. I'm just going to go down the line, but I will circle back to that to demo it because I think it's very cool. I mentioned in passing slickly that you can store your code baked into a Docker image. This actually wasn't possible unless you did some kind of Docker magic until 2.3.0. So what you can do is you can push a Docker image with your directory of flows or your flow files baked right in to Docker Hub or GCR or wherever whatever container registry you use. And then you can just use a Docker container storage block to pull that in, and it's got everything packaged already. And so this, I think, broke my brain a little bit when I saw it bubbling up, because in Prefect, we have this distinction between storage and infrastructure. And we access those things through blocks, which is our kind of interface for shared configuration logic. But, I mean, there are two things that are true. Docker combines storage and infrastructure. And two, Docker is really good and people really like it. So we need to figure out how to reason with our kind of decoupled storage and infrastructure while reaching out to Docker. And so we've done that by making the Docker container infrastructure block able to kind of know about itself, know that it's in a Docker container, and find flows within it to pull and execute at runtime. Super simple, all achieved through blocks. All of the main configuration can be achieved in the UI. I was able to do Docker-based storage and GitHub storage this morning with very little help. And if you've seen me on a PrefectLive before, you know that I'm kind of a bad software engineer. I'm more of a hacker. And so it's like a good bellwether if I can just jump into this stuff, read some docs, and make it happen. And so, yeah, the Docker storage is really cool. And really, there's kind of unlimited ways, like our application for sure, and several tech stacks on which I've worked or interacted with, use both Docker and GitHub. And I think we'll continue to watch for in the community how folks use Docker and Kubernetes and version control, and just make sure that that integration between those two, whether it's through blocks or through the CLI or whatever, just remains super frictionless. Because frankly, like containerization and version control are two just must-haves in a really mature data stack, a really mature software stack in general. So pretty excited about both of those.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for the overview. So you said earlier in the call that you're gonna demo about how to use GitHub storage, right?
Yeah, for sure. I'm happy to. Yeah, I can do that. Can I shout out a few other things that I thought were kind of cool? And I might even screen share a little.
Yeah, like if it's possible, can you screen share while like talking about things? So
Yeah.
maybe like, like for example, showing blog when talking about blog.
Yeah, absolutely. Good call. Let me move you. And then if you bring my screen share up. Is my screen share visible to folks? Nice.
It is now.
So one thing I just wanted to call out in the UI, this is something that I've requested a while and I really enjoy it, is a detailed task run page. So right now at your flow run page, you have all of your logs. Let me zoom out a little bit. You've got your logs, you've got your radar graph, you've got some things about your the storage blocks or just kind of metadata about the flow. We now have this. We had the task run tab, but you can now actually zoom in. So this is obviously a super trivial example. But now you will be able to zoom in to the task in particular. You can look at its task inputs, so the parameters that were passed to it. And you can also look at various task details, task metadata, things like cache expiration, the cache key, and any tags that task has on it. So it's just a way to kind of further debug and improve the experience when working with individual tasks or individual functions in Prefect.
Wow, that's cool. It's just like out yesterday, right? The page about task run.
Yeah. I think a couple other things that I'd like to shout out are just going to reveal themselves in my GitHub storage demo. So I'm just gonna jump into that at school.
Yeah.
All right. So GitHub storage blocks. The problem that we're trying to solve is before GitHub storage blocks. If your code was in GitHub already, you had to put your code somewhere else. And that's just a point of friction that we don't think needs to exist. And so what I'm going to do is start with some code here. This is obviously a super simple flow. And I'm going to take you through kind of how I would do this if I wasn't on live and I hadn't prepped this. So first things first, just like locally, I would make sure that my flow code runs. And it does. Fantastic. It says hello, Will. And so what I've done here, I've done some kind of pre-baking here. I have this stored in a Git repository. Now, this is a public Git repository. And you don't even need some of this other stuff that I have here, right? I have a git ignore, I have a readme, I have a Docker file because I was playing around with Docker. But you really don't need much besides the flow itself. And so you'll see this flow is there. So great, my code's on GitHub. For a lot of our users, this is already the case. So now we get into the Prefect side of things. What do I need to do to have my agent execute code that lives in GitHub and nowhere else? So what we're going to do, right, is the first thing we need to do is tell the Prefect application or the Prefect server how to target this repo. We need like an address for this repo. And for that, we use blocks, which is what we use a lot of things for. You'll see I've created this GitHub block here. And all this is basically the create screen. It takes a name, it takes a reference, which can be a branch name or a tag, and then it takes the URL of the repository. So what I've done is I've let Prefect know on the server side the address of that code and where it lives. So cool. So what I need to do now is, like we use other storage blocks come into play in a few places, but one of the main places they come into is in the deployment. We are telling the Prefect deployment where code lives or where flow code lives by specifying a storage block. So what I'm going to do broadly here is like use this block in my command line when I'm deploying a flow. So I think my terminal autocomplete is going to like spoil a lot of the fun here, but we can pretend here. So Prefect deployment build help. So no real changes here. Whoa, this is real big. There's a lot of different things you can pass. The things that we're interested in today are the entry point. So we need to know where the flow is. We're going to give it a name. Version doesn't matter to me today. Tag doesn't matter to me today. Work queue does. A work queue will it will be created if it doesn't exist. And I'm just going to pass in kind of a live work queue name. And then we're going to get cool with the storage block. And that's where we pass in that GitHub block. And I think that's probably mostly it. So prefect, deployment, build. We're going to go name. Sorry. I'm going to say flows. Dot. We have hello flow. You'll see I tested this a little bit earlier. So we're going to go name, live. Our work queue is also going to be live. And then so here, this is where I was playing with Docker before. We're actually going to go storage block. And the way that we point at the GitHub storage block is we're going to say GitHub/live. Let's see what errors come up here. OK, great. So we created deployment YAML here. One thing that I will show, so this is a little enhancement that we really like, is rather than this two-step process, various users requested a one-step process for kind of CI/CD workflows, or just because they very rarely inspect that deployment YAML. But we can actually just pass apply here. Cool. So now what we should see in my deployments, and also please feel free to ask any questions. I can kind of just talk forever. Hello flow live. So we'll see this looks like the flow that we've written with our parameters of name. We've got some details here. Work queue live, hello flow, storage is live as well. That's a block. Great. So what I'm going to do now, prefect agent start. And I've got that work queue that I just created called live. So this is going to pull for work. And then if I did everything correctly, which it's a live demo, so chances are I probably didn't, this should run. And we'll see what happens if it doesn't. Wow, first demo ever that didn't have a problem. So yeah, what this did is I didn't have to upload my code anywhere except where it was at already. I gave instructions to the Prefect application to just use a GitHub storage block, just a pointer. And then, yeah, my local agent was able to process that block, know where to pull code, and it actually pulled that repo down and found the flow in the flows directory, and then was able to execute that code and say hello to me from within just a local process. I didn't get fancy on infrastructure.
That is cool.
Yeah, and I haven't
any error.
Yeah, I actually just hard coded it to print all that stuff. I didn't actually execute any code. Let's see, I haven't checked the chat in a while. So we've got Jeff, deployments are great for orchestrating your data flows, nice for collaboration. Yeah, deployment is really where, we don't want you to have to reason with any prefect concepts before you need them, but a deployment is our entry point for a lot of the, let's say, fancier orchestration and coordination use cases that we support. In particular, scheduling, collaboration, you can see more about flow in the UI, parameterization, the ability to see the radar graph and things like that. Deployments are also where I believe we can specify additional storage and infrastructure, as well as some kind of fancier retry or chaining logic. Those are things that I use parameters for, but sound off in the chat if you have kind of other things to add there. Decade Soul, for Will. So this was basically taking a flow from local to cloud. Yes and no. So taking a flow from local to cloud, in its simplest sense, I actually did as the first thing that I did. So let me kill this agent real quick. And I'm just going to go back to Python flows. This flow, taking a flow from local to cloud, in some ways, I kind of just did that because I added observability to the Python code by interacting with the Cloud API. What I did here was incorporate it more fully into my storage stack and basically not have to work around GitHub. So it's using remote storage, the overarching value prop of which is to not need to have code stored on your local machine to execute that code. But rather than have to upload it somewhere else, we have allowed it to live where it kind of already lives.
Okay, the next question, how could we manage pulling from private repos without private keys in images?
Yeah, great question. So currently, it'll look a lot. I'll just like show you something that it will probably look a lot like. I'm going a little off script here. I'm not working on this feature. But so one of the things that I think is kind of neat about blocks. So if I wanted to create a Docker container block here, I can name it. I can do an image tag, all these things. And then you'll see this kind of like nested block thing here, Docker registry. And this is where I actually don't want to show that one live, but if I had a Docker registry block, this is where I would store my Docker registry credentials, my like Docker Hub credentials, for example. And that is probably what it will look like. So we currently have a GitHub and GitHub credentials block, but they're not linked up. So we've got this public GitHub credential, public GitHub repository block, and then you'll be able to just, if I'm assuming it should be consistent, you'll be able to just add your GitHub credentials into a separate block, which is just persistent server side with a GitHub personal access token, and then that will just it will just work.
That's pretty cool. It's very, and you can like use it for different applications as well, right? When the credential is saved as a block.
The GitHub credentials block in general, I believe that we have a Prefect GitHub collection. So I really like the collections work, so I'm just going to use this as a chance to shout it out. Yeah, here we go, Prefect GitHub. So the Prefect credential, sorry, the GitHub credentials block is actually defined in this repository. And when we create one of these collections, we actually just like pre-populate a bunch of different things that you can do with that collection. So the Prefect credential block there can be used for anything that we allow to be done in this collection, including whatever you can think of. You can extract your credentials from that block and use them however you'd like. The point is it's a like shared and secure place to store those things. But yeah, you can use the GitHub credentials block for lots of different things. You can have a raw API call with it if you want.
Cool. So, do your flow have parameters, right?
It did, yeah. It had, and I'm kind of lazy. I just like define my parameters here in this main function, and then I believe, right, it actually just pulls that in. Okay. Yeah, nice.
Do you mind trying to execute the deployment with the custom parameter and see what it do?
Yeah, let's do it. Haven't done this in a while. Let's go for it. Custom parameters. Oh, this is so slick. I forgot about this. Let's do, I see Chris is on the call.
So you had just created a custom name for the flow, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
yeah, just to be clear, a custom name where, oh no, it didn't work.
Yeah, because you created a custom name, not a custom parameter.
Oh, duh.
Yeah.
Sorry, thank you.
Yeah, a pretty cool feature of deployment is that you can also specify the name and custom name, custom description, and custom tab and schedule.
Nice. All right. I see hello, Chris here. That's good to know.
It's pretty cool. Yeah, so GitHub storage. How about Docker?
Yeah, nice. That one I've practiced a little less. Let's see how it goes. All right, so I'm going to start at the code again and walk through this whole thing. So, and how long do I have here? We've got a bit, right?
Yeah, we have like 9 minutes, but you can go like, go high level if you want to.
Cool. No, that's perfect. All right, so we've started here at our code. And I was playing around with Docker, and so I have a Docker file. This is like the simplest possible Docker file that I wanted to do for this demo. So if you're not familiar with Docker, Docker files specify how to build a Docker image that you can then pull into execution environments and basically it is a way to package all of your dependencies and code and any things that you need for runtime in a way that really facilitates naturally like portability of code and execution. Right, this is the problem that like we've all faced at one point or another. Is like, well, it worked on my machine. Docker tries to make that problem obsolete by having the same code run the same everywhere. So what I did in advance of this is I have a Docker file that just says, start with the Prefect base image. And this just has like Prefect installed and a couple dependencies that we like. And then add this flows directory to this special file in the Docker container, this opt-prefect.flows, opt-prefect-flows directory. And then in advance of this, I built this. Let's go to Docker Hub. Oh, you get to see a tabby cat. This is an extension we really like at Prefect that gives you a little cat every time you open a new tab.
Oh,
Someone can
that extension?
Tabby cat.
Okay.
All right. I don't know where it is. Hold on. Great. So you'll see 5 hours ago, I pushed this Will Raphaleson live Docker image with my flow code in it, and it's going to be the same mental model. So what we need to do next is tell Prefect like what that is, like where that is if we want to use it in a deployment. So with the deployment, with a block, do I have this one still? Okay, so I've got this prod block. And yeah, so all I did here, there's a lot of different fun stuff you can do with this Docker block. What I did is just give it a name. This is the image, and this is the public image in Docker Hub that we just saw. And then I put stream output to true. So cool, that's there. And in theory, if I use Docker as my infrastructure block in a deployment, it's going to do the rest for me kind of auto-magically. It's going to pull that Docker image, it's going to know where the flows are, and it's going to execute the flow code. So kill this agent. I'm still where I need to be here. So let's do, so this is what I'm working from before, but I need to change this a little bit. This is my CLI command here. So for one, so Prefect deployment build, same flow, name, we're going to do live Docker. Q we'll do, live Docker. Storage block, I don't need anymore. Docker as an infrastructure block kind of has storage. It's storage and infrastructure in one. It's kind of why we like it. So I'm going to do infrastructure block, and this is called Docker.
You might want to delete the storage block.
Okay, thank you. Docker container / prod. I think I did this right, but you know what? Hold on. I'm going to go back to my help here. So infra is where I do the generic Docker blocks. Yeah, cool. I think we're good here. Let's see. If Chris White's still on the call and there is something wrong with this, he's going to like, no. Yeah, no. Extra argument. Yeah. Nice. Okay. Did I apply it? Yeah, I did apply it. Okay, great. So Prefect agent star Q live Docker. Okay. Let's see if that works. So it should be the same code, same everything.
Wow.
Yeah.
So at the in the first demo, you use storage block, and the second demo, you use infrastructure block. Can you tell viewers a little bit about the difference between the two, infrastructure and storage?
Yeah, for sure. And Docker is where like the distinction between infrastructure and storage more generally becomes blurry, and also becomes a bit blurry here. We put it in infrastructure blocks because that's really the more important thing that it's doing, is it's actually running your code inside of a Docker container. So yeah, storage blocks are just file systems for the most part. It's where you can upload flow code, and in the future, any like task results that you want to cache. And so we support all of the public clouds. We support AWS S3, GCS, Azure Blob Storage. We also support the SMB file system. Those are all kind of remote. we can pretty trivially support any file system that adheres to like this FF spec, and also local file systems. It can just be like right on my computer, and that'll work. All of the whenever you need a deployment to access something that's not local, but we want to use that like shared configuration logic. And so that's what a storage block is. It tells your Prefect flows, it tells your deployment where that code is stored. Mm-hmm. Real quick, one enhancement that we made to storage blocks is you can use like subpaths. So before yesterday, if I had an S3 bucket named Will, and I wanted one flow to go to Will Dev and one to go to Will Prod, I would actually have to create two different storage blocks, one for Will Prod and one for Will Dev. And they're like, you can create a storage block via the UI. You can do it trivially in code. There's like a lot of different ways, but it still had to exist. And what that really meant is that you had to, because the storage block itself houses credentials for interacting with, let's say, S3, I now have credentials in two different blocks. And if I need to change out those credentials, I need to go to the two different blocks. So we didn't like that. And it's like clear, we got a lot of feedback from the community that the credentials and the base paths should be in one block. And then we should just allow you to specify subpaths coming out of that. So now we have this syntactic sugar of, if I was uploading to an S3 storage block, I could say my storage block is S3/will. Now that's the name of the block. And then I can just write it like it was a file path, /dev, and it will upload to that storage block. So
do you mind run it down very quick on your command line?
Oh, geez. I don't think I have an S3 block set up, or not one that works. Sorry.
Okay, no, like just a syntax.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Thank you. So it would be like Prefect.
Imagine you already create a block name.
Yeah. So Prefect deployment build, and then I would say the SB is like S3/will. And so this is the name of the block that I would see in the UI, or I'd be able to retrieve. But I can just go like /dev. The other thing that you can do if you wanted to upload into that bucket on a deployment is there's an optional path parameter where I could just put dev. They both do the same thing, but it allows you to keep the minimal amount centralized to that one block, but then in all file storage blocks, specify any number of nested paths.
And if there's another path, there's like a children path under dev, then what do you do?
Yeah, I could just go dev 1.
Okay.
Dev 2, things like that.
Cool. And that's a very nice feature.
Yeah, I like it too. Sorry, your original question I got off track on the difference between storage and infrastructure blocks. Infrastructure blocks, I think it is the appropriate name. I think about infrastructure blocks really as what we used to call them, which was flow runners. It's like, what is the machine? What is the box? What is the process that is actually running your flow code? Docker is a weird one because it kind of combines, this one Docker image combines the code with an entry point with an execution environment. But these infrastructure blocks with these flow runners are more the machine that it is. Is that really the right thing? The machine that it's working on? It's like, it's a little closer to execution environment. Sorry, I'm a little bit removed from infrastructure these days. But we can use infrastructure blocks of Docker, of Kubernetes jobs. Thank you. Yeah, that bringing it up, that's useful. Kubernetes jobs, it can just be local processes. You can spin an agent up on an EC2 instance. But you would use an infrastructure block if you needed to tell Prefect about that block, if it couldn't just tell Prefect about that infrastructure, if it couldn't just know already. But if the agent is just running in a process on your machine, you don't ever have to specify an infrastructure block. You can if you want. You can specify a local process. The blocks here for like infrastructure, so run infrastructure. Yeah, currently we have Docker containers. And is that all of them? All right, I thought we had a few more. Oh, no, sorry. These are just mine. Capability, run infra, Kubernetes job, process, and Docker container. And I think we will be continuing to expand how we think about infrastructure to various use cases.
It's very cool demo, Will. Thank you for the explanation on the difference between the two.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we're going to the end of PrefectLive now. Thank you everybody for watching, and thank you, Will, for presenting.
Yeah, totally. And thanks to the open source contributors on this release, we have Derrida, JMG Duarte, and MSS Android. Thanks, y'all.